Hello and welcome to the January 14th edition of the Gold, Goats, and Guns Short News Part 2. Because when a piece of news like this happens, it's worth going back to the well. Normally, I would only do one of these in a day and work on it for tomorrow, but this is too important. This is too big. So the Russians just announced that they would be investing up to $10 billion in Bitcoin. Now, for those of you who've been following me for a long time, you'll know that I've been following the Russia crypto story literally from the beginning, and I've talked about all sorts of stuff. I've talked about minor reward coin. I've talked about the crypto ruble. I've talked about all of this stuff. I've talked about just why the Russians would want to eventually use cryptocurrencies to avoid any financial confrontation with the United States. That as the relationship between Russia and the United States continued to fall into the gutter, as the Trump administration went along with the Russiagate investigation against Donald Trump by seeing the Russians as a hyper competitor in a global marketplace, in the global, geopolitical landscape, as Trump has legitimized Russia as a major threat to U.S. hegemony across the world by sanctioning and by everything else that he's done so far. He's actually legitimized the Russians at this point in a way that previously was not the case. And so now it was always the logical next step for the Russians at some point to say, okay, if you're serious about sanctioning everybody, about trying to cut us off from the global financial system and all of our friends and all of the people that we do business with, what are we going to do? I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to start accepting Bitcoin, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. So the Russians have about $470 billion in foreign exchange reserves, which is a lot. They're currently running a budgetary surplus of around 2.5% or so. It might even be as much as 3%. That'll attenuate next year with lower oil prices. Last year was an almost trifecta of goodness for the Russian treasury. We cannot expect that to continue in 2019. Expect the Western rating agencies to use that as an excuse not to raise their credit rating. Oh, by the way, just let's make that a little point as an aside. But what's important to understand here is that Russia is going to assist Iran in getting around U.S. sanctions by buying and reselling Iranian oil. They could just as easily, they're going to do it in Iranian reals and Russian rubles, and they can also do it by allowing Iran to help them that way through accepting Bitcoin or anything else. And obviously a lot of the trade will go through the Shanghai exchange, oil exchange, the so-called Petro Yuan contract. That's another way that they're going to avoid these sanctions. But this is a major, major, major thumb in the eye of all the major Western institutions as we approach a sovereign debt crisis in Europe. Okay, the IMF is sounding louder and louder claxons of worry about the political and financial stability in Europe and how the world central banks are not prepared. They've said this. They've issued no less than 2 major warnings have come out of major IMF officials in the last couple of months. They're also continually talking about a crypto version of their special drawing rights, or SDR, as that's always been the plan for them to respond to a financial crisis that's bigger than the central banks. And that's the situation we're on the verge of right now. And so the IMF has been prepping the narrative for months now, and I'm sure preparations are going on behind the scenes in order to do this. And the legitimization of crypto was supposed to happen with the IMF coming out with a crypto version or a blockchain version of their SDR. And Russia just said, nuts to that. We'll just take Bitcoin. It's already there. People are already using it. So how big is this? Well, last year, or in early 2018 when Bitcoin hit its peak, or actually hit its peak in December 2017, Bitcoin had an enormous market cap of well over what? It's trading $3,800 today or so at 20,000, so 6 times, about 350 to $400 billion. Today it's sitting right around $63 billion. So the Russians deciding that they're going to put $10 billion into Bitcoin and take $10 billion in Bitcoin effectively off the market is like buying a 16% share in Bitcoin right now. That's enormous. They're talking about buying up literally 15 to 16% of the world's current supply of Bitcoins. If you don't think that that's bullish for Bitcoin, well, I don't know what else to tell you. So what's important here is there's a number of things that this is important of. But the main takeaway here is that the Russians just legitimize crypto as a real world asset that they are willing to take in real world situations to avoid the political and financial and physical confrontation with the United States. Yet again, the Russians saying, "Yeah, that's enough. We're done. We're going our own way." It's like they're like the MGTOW movement of geopolitics. Nope, that's it. We're done. We're doing our own thing, and we're going to do it in such a way that it ensures Russia's survival, and that Russia is able to not only survive but thrive. And honestly, this is the legitimization signal that the crypto markets have been waiting for over a year. So to me, it's always been the next logical move for them. It's always been that moment. And they've been talking about this and flirting with it here and there. And then we haven't heard anything for months from them, right? Now, I haven't really heard anything from the Russians on the crypto front since early 2018. Not going on really at all, right? But they've talked about it. And you have to remember that once you're talking about a cross-border, you're talking about something that moves capital across borders without any interference. And in this case, a government is saying, look, we'll process the transactions. We're going to legitimize all this. It's going to become a reserve asset. That means that Russian banks are going to be able to trade rubles for bitcoins and dollars for bitcoins and be able to move them wherever they need to go. This just blows open the door of everything we've ever thought crypto was capable of. I always said that there would come a moment that as much as the Bitcoin purists and hardcore narco-capitalists like myself have been worried about the government getting its hands on crypto, the truth of the matter is that to go from where we are to where we need to go, which is a truly decentralized monetary system where humans are not involved in the creation of new monetary units, right? That in order for that to happen, we have to go through a period of where the state is involved, where governments legitimize the use of crypto as a means by which for people to begin adopting the use of it in everyday life, right? Because truthfully, at the end of the day, it's, with the way we interact with our governments is and the way we interact with our governments ultimately, and the way we interact with each other is circumscribed by how we interact with our government. So look, this is just something that needs to happen, or needed to happen in order to create this hybrid. But understand that this is a thumb in the eye to the IMF, who thoroughly was convinced that they were going to have the next monetary system be based on them, and then they were eventually going to roll up all the national central banks in and be subservient to them. So the Fed and the ECB and the Swiss National Bank and the Bank of Japan and all of them would all be subservient to the IMF. And the Russians just said, no, nuts. We'll use Bitcoin. We don't need to use your crypto SDR. The Russians just announced the beginnings of the world's new monetary system. That's what just happened, because that's the logical thing that comes next. Okay, this has been the Gold, Goats, and Guns Short News Part 2 for Monday, January 14th, 2019. If you like what you heard today, please give a like and subscribe down below. That would be great. You guys know I need the help. We're doing great, though. We're up to almost 1,450 people. Tonight, in about a couple of hours, there's going to be a live stream at 8 o'clock. We're going to be discussing this. We'll be discussing Brexit, discussing a lot of other things. We also do this on every Monday night at 8 and every Friday night at 8:30. You can follow my work over at tomluongo.me, and you can pledge support over at Patreon at Patreon/Gold, Goats, and Guns for now. And if you do want to support in some other way, email me directly at tom.luongo outlook.com, and we'll discuss terms. You guys take care. You have a great afternoon. Be well, and keep your stick on the ice.